Imagine dying and watching your entire life flash before your eyes in seconds. Every smile you gave, every lie you told, every moment you helped someone or hurt them. Now imagine feeling exactly what they felt when you did it. This isn't religion. This isn't punishment. This is what thousands of people who died and came back describe as the life review. A panoramic movie of your existence where time doesn't exist, and you become both the judge and the judged. Scientists can't explain it. Religious leaders debate it, but the experiencers all say the same thing. In those moments beyond death, you don't just see your life, you feel every consequence of your actions. The kindness you showed a stranger that changed their day. The cruel words that destroyed someone's confidence. All of it compressed into seconds that feel like eternity. What they discovered on the other side challenges everything we think about time, consciousness, and what really matters. This is their story. Dr. Thomas Bennett was a successful cardiac surgeon. 53 years old, respected, wealthy. Then his heart stopped during a routine procedure. What happened next changed everything he thought he knew about life and death. Thomas found himself outside his body, watching the medical team work on him. But that lasted only seconds. Then came what he calls the most profound experience of his existence. The life review. It started without warning. Suddenly he was 5 years old again, pushing another kid on the playground. But this time he didn't just see it from his perspective. He felt what that boy felt. The humiliation, the pain, the confusion about why someone would hurt him. Thomas experienced it all as if he were that child. Then the scenes accelerated. His entire life began playing simultaneously, yet he could focus on any moment with perfect clarity. Time didn't work the way it does here. 70 seconds of cardiac arrest contained what felt like hours of review. He saw his 12th birthday party, his first kiss, the day he got accepted to medical school. But here's what shattered him. He also felt the impact of every interaction from the other person's perspective. When he ignored a homeless man on the street, he felt that man's rejection and shame. When he snapped at a nurse after a long surgery, he experienced her hurt and diminished self-worth. The review wasn't chronological. It wasn't organized. Everything existed at once in this space where linear time had no meaning. He could zoom into any moment with intention, or let the panoramic view wash over him. There was no bearded figure judging him, no demons, no angels with clipboards. The judgment came from within, from his own consciousness finally understanding the full weight of his choices. The moments that stood out most weren't his professional achievements or financial success. Those barely registered. What blazed with significance were the small acts of kindness he'd forgotten. Helping an elderly woman carry groceries, listening to a colleague who was struggling, donating anonymously to a family in need. These moments glowed with an intensity that his awards and recognition never could. And the cruel moments, the selfish ones, they burned differently. Not with hellfire, but with the pain of genuine understanding and remorse. Thomas saw how his workaholism had emotionally abandoned his children. He felt their loneliness waiting for a father who never came home. He experienced his wife's gradual resignation as she stopped expecting him to prioritize their marriage. These weren't presented as accusations. They simply were. Truth without filter or excuse. What shocked him most was realizing that nothing was ever truly private. Every thought, every intention, every secret motivation was visible in this review. The charitable donation he'd made primarily for tax benefits showed its hollow core. The patient he'd treated with extra care because she was wealthy revealed his bias. But also, the moments when he genuinely connected with no ulterior motive shined with unmistakable authenticity. After what felt like hours but measured as barely a minute of earthly time, Thomas returned to his body. The defibrillator had restarted his heart, but the man who came back was transformed. He couldn't return to his old life pretending he hadn't seen what he'd seen. He reduced his surgical schedule by half. He started actually being present with his family. He began volunteering at free clinics, not for recognition or redemption, but because the life review had recalibrated his understanding of what matters. When other doctors asked what changed him, he struggled to explain. How do you describe experiencing your entire existence outside of time? How do you convey the feeling of inhabiting another person's consciousness and understanding the ripples of your every action? Most importantly, how do you communicate that judgment isn't something imposed by an external deity, but something that emerges naturally when consciousness finally sees itself clearly? Sarah Mitchell's life review came during a drowning accident at age 28. She was underwater for nearly 4 minutes before lifeguards pulled her out. But in that space beyond breath, time revealed its true nature. It doesn't exist the way we think it does. Sarah describes it as being in a place where past, present, and future were simultaneously accessible. Her life wasn't playing on a screen. It was the environment. She could look left and see her childhood, look right and witness her adult years, look up and somehow perceive potential futures that branched from different choices. Everything interconnected in ways that linear language fails to capture. The review focused intensely on moments she'd completely forgotten. A smile she'd given to a depressed teenager at a bus stop. She not only saw that moment again, she entered it fully. She became that teenager and felt how her simple smile had been the first human acknowledgement he'd received in days. She felt how it had interrupted his spiral of dark thoughts. How it had given him just enough hope to make it home safely that night. Then she saw further. She witnessed how that teenager, because he survived that night, later became a teacher who inspired hundreds of students. She saw the ripple effects of her 3-second smile cascading through decades and touching lives she'd never physically met. This is what near-death experiencers mean when they say everything is connected. One small act of genuine kindness doesn't just affect one person in one moment. It radiates outward in ways our time-bound consciousness can't perceive while we're alive. But the review also showed Sarah her cruelties with the same unblinking clarity. In college, she'd participated in socially excluding another woman from their friend group. During the life review, Sarah became that woman. She felt the devastating isolation, the confusion about what she'd done wrong, the damage to her self-esteem that lasted years. She experienced the depression that followed, the social anxiety that developed, the opportunities that woman had avoided because her confidence had been shattered. Sarah felt all of it as her own experience. This is the aspect of life review that experiencers describe as most challenging. It's not punishment from an external source. It's direct, unmediated understanding of how your choices affected other conscious beings. There's no hiding from it, no rationalization that works, no way to minimize or excuse. You simply know with complete clarity what you did and what it meant. What makes this even more profound is that the review apparently includes not just actions, but intentions and thoughts. Sarah saw moments when she'd smiled at someone while internally judging them. The review showed her how people often sensed that incongruence, even if they couldn't articulate it. She saw how her unspoken resentments had created subtle distance in relationships, how her genuine appreciation had strengthened connections in ways she'd never recognized. The mathematics of compassion became visible. Every time she'd chosen patience over frustration, understanding over judgment, generosity over selfishness, the effects multiplied outward in quantifiable ways. And every time she'd chosen the opposite, those effects also multiplied, creating cascades of small harms. Time in the review operated on principles that physics can't yet explain. Sarah could spend what felt like an hour examining a conversation that had lasted 3 minutes in real time. She could see it from multiple perspectives simultaneously, her own, the other person's, and somehow from an objective third-person view that revealed dynamics neither participant had consciously recognized. Some researchers studying near-death experiences call this the panoramic memory. Others describe it as life review phenomenon. But these clinical terms don't capture the transformative power of the experience. When Sarah returned to her body on that beach, coughing up water and gasping for air, she was returning with knowledge that changed everything. She'd seen that life isn't really about achievement, accumulation, or status. It's about the quality of consciousness you bring to each interaction. It's about whether you're adding to the total sum of compassion and understanding in the universe or subtracting from it. The life review showed her that these aren't abstract spiritual concepts. They're concrete realities with measurable effects that become visible when you're no longer trapped in linear time. Sarah now lives with constant awareness that every interaction matters. Every choice to be kind or cruel will eventually be reviewed with perfect clarity. Not by an external judge, but by her own consciousness when it's finally free to see the full picture. This knowledge hasn't made her perfect. She still gets frustrated, still makes mistakes, but she can't pretend anymore that her private thoughts and small actions don't matter. The life review proved they're actually the only things that truly do. Marcus Webb was a combat veteran who flatlined after an IED explosion in Afghanistan. His life review contained elements that military psychologists still struggle to process. During the 3 minutes his heart wasn't beating, Marcus experienced not just his own life, but the lives he'd taken in combat. He became each person he'd killed. He felt their final moments, their fear, their confusion, their pain, but it wasn't presented as condemnation. The review showed context. It revealed that in that space beyond death, there's understanding of circumstances, of impossible choices, of the complicated morality of survival situations. Marcus felt the soldiers he'd killed, but he also somehow understood that they understood. That consciousness, when freed from the body and the moment, comprehends complexity that judgment can't hold. What devastated him more than the combat deaths were the small cruelties, dismissing a fellow soldier who'd tried to talk about his trauma. That moment blazed in the review with significance far greater than the firefights. He felt that soldier's desperate need for connection, his crushing isolation when Marcus had blown him off, the downward spiral that followed. The review showed Marcus that this soldier had later taken his own life, and that his dismissal had been one link in a chain of abandoned connection attempts. Could Marcus have prevented that suicide? The review didn't present answers that simple, but it showed him the weight of chosen disconnection, of emotional availability withheld when someone reached out. Here's what makes the life review phenomenon so challenging for materialist neuroscience. These experiences happen when the brain shows no activity. Flat EEG, no oxygen, no measurable neural function. Yet people report experiences more vivid, more detailed, more memorable than normal waking consciousness. They describe processing decades of life with multi-perspective awareness in minutes or seconds of clinical death. Dr. Pim van Lommel, a Dutch cardiologist who studied over 300 cardiac arrest patients, documented that life reviews occur specifically during periods of verified brain inactivity. The patients who reported them had flat EEG readings, no cortical function, yet they came back with detailed, transformative memories that changed their fundamental values and behaviors. The materialist explanation that these are hallucinations produced by a dying brain fails on multiple fronts. Hallucinations don't create lasting personality transformation. They don't provide accurate information about events the person couldn't have witnessed. They don't generate experiences that thousands of people across cultures describe in remarkably similar terms. The life review suggests something radical: that consciousness isn't produced by the brain but rather filtered through it. That memory isn't stored in neurons but in some substrate of reality that brain activity normally limits our access to. When the brain stops, these filters drop, and consciousness experiences itself more directly, more completely. This explains why the review can present your entire life simultaneously, why it includes perspectives you never had access to, why it reveals the consequences of actions you never witnessed. The information isn't stored in your brain. It's stored in the fabric of consciousness itself, in what some traditions call the Akashic records, what physicists might call the quantum field, what experiencers describe as simply knowing. Marcus's review showed him something else crucial. Intention matters more than outcome. A surgery that killed a patient but was performed with complete competence and care showed differently than a surgery that succeeded but was done carelessly. A shot that killed an enemy combatant in legitimate defense appeared differently than one taken in anger or revenge. The review apparently doesn't judge actions by their external results, but by the consciousness that motivated them. This has profound implications. It suggests that what we're building through our lives isn't really a resume of accomplishments or a bank account of possessions. We're building a consciousness, a quality of awareness and intention that somehow persists beyond the body. The life review is the moment that consciousness finally sees itself clearly, without the distortions that physical existence imposes. When Marcus returned from that experience, he was diagnosed with severe PTSD. But alongside the trauma symptoms, he carried something else: certainty about what actually matters. He became a counselor for other veterans, not because he'd resolved his own pain, but because the life review had shown him that showing up for another person as suffering is among the most significant things a human can do. He works with suicidal veterans, specifically carrying always the knowledge of that soldier he'd dismissed, understanding now what he couldn't then. That witnessing another person's pain with genuine presence creates effects that ripple farther than we can imagine. The life review isn't about religion or belief systems. Christians have them. Atheists have them. Buddhists, Muslims, people with no spiritual framework at all. The experience transcends religious interpretation, while simultaneously validating the core ethical teaching every wisdom tradition shares. How you treat others matters absolutely, because eventually, outside the constraints of time and ego, you will be them. You will feel what they felt. You will understand what you did. And that understanding, arising from your own consciousness finally seeing truly, is more powerful than any external judgment could ever be. The scientific study of life reviews during near-death experiences raises uncomfortable questions for mainstream neuroscience. Dr. Bruce Grayson at the University of Virginia has documented thousands of cases where people reported these experiences during verified periods of cardiac arrest and brain inactivity. The data consistently shows that these reviews happen when the brain shouldn't be capable of producing any experience at all, let alone ones more vivid and complex than normal consciousness. What makes life reviews especially challenging to explain conventionally is their consistent structure across vastly different people. A 5-year-old child who nearly drowned reports the same basic phenomenon as an 80-year-old man who flatlined during surgery. Different content but the same essential features: panoramic awareness, multi-perspective perception, emotional truth of actions revealed, sense of existing outside linear time. This cross-cultural, cross-age consistency suggests something real is happening, not just brain chemistry misfiring randomly as oxygen depletes. The implications are staggering. If consciousness can access complete life memories during brain death, where is that information stored? If you can experience another person's emotions and perspectives during events you only witnessed from your own viewpoint, where is that information coming from? If your thoughts and intentions are revealed as clearly as your actions, what is consciousness actually tracking? Some cutting-edge theories in quantum biology suggest that consciousness might be a fundamental feature of reality, not an emergent property of complex neural networks. That memories might be stored in quantum states that transcend individual brains. That the sense of separate, isolated self might be the illusion, while the interconnected awareness revealed in life reviews might be the deeper truth. Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose have proposed that consciousness arises from quantum processes in cellular structures called microtubules. When the brain dies, these quantum states don't necessarily vanish. They return to the quantum field, carrying information with them. Could life reviews be the experience of consciousness temporarily existing in this quantum state before either returning to the body or transitioning fully beyond it? This might explain why reviews can present information the individual brain never processed. Why they can show consequences of actions that occurred far away or years later. The information isn't stored in the individual brain, but in the connected field of consciousness that all brains access. What do people who've experienced life reviews consistently say about living differently afterward? First, they report that small kindnesses matter more than grand achievements. The magnitude of an action in the review isn't measured by its external impressiveness, but by the quality of consciousness and genuine care it contained. A smile given with real warmth to a struggling stranger appears more significant than a large charitable donation made primarily for recognition. Second, they consistently report that judgment is internal, not external. No deity condemned them, no demons appeared. Instead, their own consciousness, finally seeing clearly, generated feelings of remorse for harm caused and joy for love shared. This suggests that concepts like karma or divine judgment might be metaphors for something real, the inevitable confrontation with truth that comes when filters of ego and self-deception drop. Third, they describe time as revealing itself to be radically different than our normal perception. Past, present, and future appeared simultaneously accessible. Cause and effect chains that take years to unfold in linear time appeared instantly visible in the review state. This matches certain interpretations of quantum physics and relativity that suggest time's linear flow might be a feature of consciousness in physical bodies, not a feature of reality itself. Fourth, nearly all experiencers report that the review fundamentally changed their values. Things they'd spent decades pursuing, wealth, status, achievement, appeared hollow and irrelevant. Things they'd barely noticed while alive, moments of genuine connection, acts of real kindness, times they'd chosen compassion over convenience, appeared as the most significant elements of their existence. If we take these reports seriously, they suggest that human life might have a very different purpose than our society assumes. We're not here to accumulate resources, climb hierarchies, or defeat competitors. We're here to develop consciousness, to expand our capacity for awareness and compassion, to add to the total sum of love and understanding in the universe. The life review is the final exam, but it's not graded by an external teacher. It's the moment your consciousness finally sees its own work clearly. Here's perhaps the most important insight from life review research. You're building your review right now. Every interaction you have, every choice you make between kindness and cruelty, patience and frustration, generosity and selfishness, is creating the content you'll eventually experience with complete clarity. Not because a deity is recording your sins, but because consciousness apparently retains everything and eventually, you'll see it all without the protective filters of ego and rationalization that normally shield you from the full truth of your impact on others. This isn't meant to terrify. Most experiencers report that the review, while sometimes painful, was ultimately loving. The consciousness that watches the review with you, whether you interpret it as your higher self, as God, as the universe, or simply as awareness itself, doesn't condemn. It understands. It sees your struggles, your limitations, your wounds that caused you to wound others. But it also sees clearly what you did with what you had, whether you chose to grow toward love or to contract into fear. And somehow, experiencers report, that distinction matters more than anything else. We exist in time believing our private thoughts are private, our small cruelties don't really count, our moments of genuine kindness are quickly forgotten. The life review reveals all of that as illusion. Everything is recorded, everything matters, everything connects. Not in some surveillance state nightmare, but in a universe where consciousness is fundamental and interconnected, where what you do to others you ultimately do to yourself because separation itself is the illusion. This is the message thousands of people who've died and returned are trying to share. Live like your life review is already happening. Because in a universe where time isn't really linear, in a very real sense, it already is. If your life review started right now, would you be proud of what you'd see? You don't have to die to change. Hit subscribe right now and turn on those notifications. Join thousands waking up to what actually matters. Share this video with someone who desperately needs this wake-up call. Comment. What moment in your life would you most want to revisit? What act of kindness have you forgotten that might have changed someone's entire world? Let's build a community that lives like the life review is real. Because maybe it is. I'll see you in the next one. And choose wisely what you do with every single second you've been given.